Welcome to the Law Firm Lab by MB Law Firm Consulting, the podcast where we explore how law firms grow smarter, scale sustainably, and lead with clarity. Each episode, we sit down with industry experts, firm leaders, and business minds to uncover practical strategies that help today's law firms operate at their best. Whether you're driving growth, shaping leadership, building culture, or pioneering innovation, get ready to uncover proven practices you can apply immediately in your firm. Let's get started.
So hello, welcome. I am Margaret Burke, and today I am joined by Christy Rue and Lauren Johnson, both consultants at MB Law Firm Consulting. Today we are going to talk about a topic that comes up often, partnership to include non-equity partner versus equity partner. And we're really going to talk about what law firm owners need to consider, and also what the attorneys considering partnership need to consider as they're making their decisions about their career path. Regarding this topic, expectations and even titles are often misunderstood. Becoming a partner, an equity partner, isn't just about hitting the numbers or being technically excellent. It's really about learning how to think, act, lead like a business owner, and just start to shift the mind thought from an individual contributor to a contributor that is focused on the success of the firm as a whole. So we wanted to have an honest conversation about this topic and to touch on the transition and the things that folks should consider as they're going through this process. So let's jump in on this incredible conversation that I think everyone listening has had this conversation or thought about having this conversation. So we'll start with the titles. This can be an area that people misunderstand. So we have partnership, we have non-equity partner, we have of counsel. Kirsty and Lauren hear this a lot from our clients. I'd love for you to jump in and talk a little bit about the differences between those titles and what that can mean for the firm and the individual attorney.
I think it's quite interesting, just drawing attention to the title topic. Oftentimes it's seen as a promotion, which by and large it is, up until about equity partner. Once we get to the equity partner stage, it's no longer just a title that's rewarded. There's a responsibility that comes with it. It's that ownership that's entwined. And Lauren was talking about it yesterday on how there is this sense of firm citizenship and this greater responsibility towards the firm, more than just the billable hour. It's about a mentorship. It's about all rowing in the right direction, in the same direction. Lauren, do you want to touch on a few of those points as well?
Yeah, I think, as you're rising up through the ranks at any firm, right, your roles and responsibilities naturally change. But a lot of times what we see is that attorneys are not prepared or have not been guided to start making those types of paradigm shifts, right? So as an associate, I'm here to be a profit center. I'm here to bill as much as possible, learn as much as possible. I am a sponge. And a lot of attorneys are really good at doing that. But then you start rising up through the ranks. Some firms have a distinction between associate and senior, where as a senior associate, they're grooming you to start mentoring younger associates and start delegating more. When you get up to what I would say, non-equity partner level or income partner, right? You're not at the equity level. There starts to be more of a shift in that, right? That you are starting to, people are looking to you to be a leader in the firm. So that idea of spearheading different firm citizenship initiatives, right? Are one of your goals to be mentoring younger attorneys? Are you focused on, technical expertise and identifying areas where the firm can grow from a technology standpoint, different practice areas you want to bring in? Though that is work that is non-billable, but you've got to start shifting your mind to that, because especially if your goal is to become equity partner level, right? At that point, now you have to change from looking at like, what's best for me? How do I accomplish my personal goals in this role, to what is truly best for the firm? And I think that that's where a lot of times people are not prepared to make that shift because it's not part of conversations when you're having as you're rising up through the ranks. That just often isn't touched upon. So I don't think people necessarily have a lot of clarity on what the distinction is between partner and equity partner. Margaret, I know you've seen that a lot with clients you've worked with and firms that you've been a part with, right? Of like what that looks like when somebody all of a sudden has a new title but doesn't really understand what that role looks like. So maybe what's sort of your advice of best practices of what firms can do better to help people rise more effectively through the ranks?
Before I answer, I do want to touch on a few things. You both touched on the different roles, in the progression. And although most of our listeners are attorneys or work with attorneys, I think it's worth mentioning. So, the titles can differ, but there's really the associate, right? There's that attorney that might be 1 year to 7 years, and they're either starting to perfect their skills or they have in their transition to the next level. Often the next level is partner, and partner is usually, you know, given or earned. Earn is a better word. Actually, partner is earned because of they've developed their ability to manage folks, to bring in clients, and it usually helps people bring in clients once they have partner. And then there's equity partner, which is the owner. And so, I wanted to touch on that because it's actually interesting how sometimes people really confuse partner with equity. But today, to answer Lauren's question, you know, first, it's almost explaining what we just started to touch on, like what are the differences? Because some folks at firms, like it may seem basic, but sometimes people think partner means equity partner, and sometimes
Yep.
it's not the case. So I think firms that really outline one, the different levels that folks can earn at their firm, and then what will change for you when you become, let's say, a partner, and what information will be shared with you? What information will continue not to be shared with you? Because I think there can be misalignment on what happens when you progress through your career at a law firm. So law firms can really be deliberate and outline what is expected of that person, what that person can expect from the firm. It is a relationship. It's not a one-way relationship. It's a two-way relationship. And just being really communicating clearly, even if let's say the owner or the managing partner of the firm thinks it's second nature, it's actually usually not ever second nature to people at a law firm what happens. So being really clear, outlining it, yes, meeting and talking about it. Law firms are historically incredibly busy, and sometimes folks don't feel they have time to do that, but you're going to save a lot of time by setting expectations in the beginning that will be avoid hours later.
Yeah, I think what when you touched on that idea of the information sharing and what information you can expect to have access to at varying levels within the firm is so important because I do see that is an area where resentment can build up, that somebody rising up through the ranks has an expectation, whether it's reasonable or unreasonable, well, we're not going to put a judgment on it, but they're expecting that now that I'm a partner, I'm going to know all these different things about the firm. And once and that's not always the case, right? There is a difference between what gets shared at a partner level versus at an equity partner level. And sometimes even within the equity partner level, there may be sort of a management committee within that. And so I think that when you aren't outlining that and explaining, when you become a partner, here's what you can expect to get access to, and here's what we're going to share with you, and then here are some things that we probably won't share with you. If you convey that at the outset, you are going to prevent a lot of sort of resentment that goes on behind the scenes where somebody says, I thought I would have access to this. They're getting frustrated because they don't, but they're not always willing to share that with you or say that. They just get this growing resentment that's bubbling behind the scenes that, you may not even be aware of is occurring.
And that being said, as much as there is this information sharing that's going to happen, what you need to understand when you're rising through those ranks and you get to that point, there's a responsibility that comes with that information sharing. So it's not
Yes.
just to no end. You're not just going to get access to information and nothing is done about it. This information is shared with you, particularly firm financials, etc., because there is a conjoined responsibility that is accompanied with that information sharing. And that being said, the particularly equity partner, notwithstanding the other levels, yes, necessarily, but particularly with equity partnerships, it is a strategic decision. It is not an emotive one. It is not merely just a reward without any responsibility. It's about bringing someone into your camp saying, I want to get in business with you. Today we share in the profits and the loss, the good and the bad, and we'll make it happen together. And that's truly what equity partner means. It is not merely just a status or a bump in salary or some sort of bonus or incentive. There's so much more to it.
Thank you. I love that. I'm laughing because I know Christy's so passionate about this topic. Um, you know, it's interesting. So this is such a big topic. I almost think we're going to need to have a second episode, but I want to transition into another question that comes up a lot, which is, let's focus on owners first. Like, when do you consider offering equity? We're sort of skipping over partnership a little bit for a moment, but the equity is a question that comes up more often where folks have a very hard time making the decision on that one because it's such a commitment. So Lauren, Kirsty, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are the things that current owners of law firms should be looking for and considering when they think that someone at their firm might be ready to join the equity team.
It's funny you asked that because fairly recently, and I think it probably was a couple of days ago, one of our clients said to me that them and their partner are very different people fundamentally. However, what makes them a great partnership is not just the differences, the yin and the yang, but fundamentally they are aligned. Their driving forces are almost identical. Therefore, they are rowing in the same direction. And it really brings back to that point that if you're not aligned strategically with the goals of what the firm seeks to achieve 5, 7, 10 years down the line, it's not going to work. You need to be like-minded and have the same driving forces and seek to achieve the same goal.
It is so true, right? Sort of your driving forces you can be very different people, but if your driving forces are similar, it's going to allow you to work well together. I also think, to Christy's point, this should not be an emotive decision. It really has to, I always think about it as, is this somebody I want to be in my foxhole with me? Like, we're going into battle. Do I want this person in my foxhole? Do I trust them with my life? Because in many ways, that's what you're doing. This is a big commitment, and you have to really give it the due diligence and the evaluation that is warranted, because the problem is that once you invite somebody and ask them to be an equity partner, it is very hard to walk that back if all of a sudden you're like, this really wasn't a great idea. So, it needs to be somebody you're aligned with. I always think, is it somebody that has the ability to put the best interest in the firm above their own self-interest? Is it somebody that you respect this person? Do you trust them? But do your employees respect and trust them? That's important too. Is it somebody that you say, can I work well with this person? I also think it's important to evaluate your larger plans for the firm. What is the strategic vision for the firm? And within the equity leadership team, are there some characteristic qualities that are missing at that equity level that the firm would really benefit from? And is there somebody from the firm that their expertise, their knowledge, they bring something to the table that is going to help elevate the firm as a whole, that when you bring them in for equity, you can really leverage. They've got particular traits that maybe you don't have. That idea of that yin to your yang, what's going to make a more well-rounded leadership team as well. I think those are things that you have to ask yourself, and I think you have to be brutally honest in your answers to those questions, and sort of, you can't completely differentiate, do I like this person, do I trust them, but that can't be the only reason you're giving somebody equity,
Yeah.
because that's not gonna be enough to sustain a good long-term working relationship at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's very true. And often firms will have this individual at their firm that is so valuable from sometimes a financial perspective. They
Yep.
could be bringing in a lot of business and their book is growing and they feel like we need to elevate them before they jump and go to another
Right.
firm. And sometimes like some of the traits that you both just discussed are overlooked because the reality is the pressure to bring this person on. And if they're
Yes.
not a good firm citizen and they're not presenting the behaviors that you want of everyone at your firm, it can be a really slippery slope if you bring that person on.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where firms really understand what's important to them as a firm and they have almost like their core values are checked
Yeah.
before they make these decisions, it will really help.
And it impacts down the line, right, Margaret? So that if you sort of say, these are our core values, and I'm an associate and I believe in those core values, that's part of why I came to the firm, I'm with the firm, I see a path forward with this firm. And then the firm makes somebody equity partner that doesn't align with any of those core values, that is going to make me really second guess my future with this firm, because now I've lost trust. I've lost credibility because you've elevated somebody to equity partner that's not in line with the core values at all. And so I do think it has such a global impact, these types of decisions, that a lot of times the firm owners, they're not even necessarily thinking about that sort of trickle down effect of like how other people are going to perceive and receive this decision.
Even at grassroots level, all the way up to leadership, you're going to have it felt from the perspective of decision making. You're going to reach decision making stalemates. You're not going to be able to implement new processes, procedures. You're not going to be able to seek to achieve a goal because you're not aligned. This person has, you viewed them as coming on with a book of business, or you're panic appointing as equity partner.
Mhm.
And now we're not sure if we actually do work well in the kitchen together. And suddenly we can't make decisions. We don't agree. The firm is feeling it. And where to from here? It becomes a very volatile situation for both you at the top and the firm going down.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so true. And I think anyone that's been in law firms in a leadership role, this is ringing true. It's a common situation. We, in addition, I'll just bullet a few other things that we talk about internally is the owner being prepared. Like, what are they going to be sharing with this equity partner? What's not being shared? Like, being comfortable with that. I'm going to make the executive decision that we're going to have a part 2 to this podcast because we actually there's so much to unpack, and we just started to talk about it. Because we're focusing on the owner side now, but then there's also the person considering whether or not they even want to be an equity partner, because that's another reality. We have some people like, what, I'm fine getting a paycheck. I don't need to be part of the ups and downs of
Right.
law firm ownership. So we're going to have another episode and really unpack that also. And, it's coming to the end of our time together today. And it feels so short because, again, we're pretty passionate about this topic. But what we'd like to have for some takeaways today for our audience is just knowing that, these situations do occur at, I'm going to throw it out there, most law firms. So you're not alone. And there is the deliberate process of planning and preparing and knowing that it is an important process to have in place at your firms to retain people and to make sure that it continues to be a great place to work. So again, like, we're so happy to have everyone here today. Kirsty, Lauren, thank you so much for, being here to talk about this very fun topic that I cannot tell you how often we do have this conversation internally. We're happy to share it with you. Please, we would love for you to follow us. Please like us. For everyone tuning in, you can also reach the three of us at mblawfirmconsultant.com. It's either Kirsty, Lauren, or Margaret. Please reach out if you want to have a separate conversation about this. We're always happy to chat. If you enjoyed this episode, we would love for you to share it. Again, like it, follow it, tune in next time because we are going to continue this conversation very soon. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.